Well,
Right.
good. All right, so let's talk about your book because
Sure.
yesterday was the funeral for Erica Garner, and we'll get to
Right.
that in a moment. Who was, of course, the daughter of Eric Garner, and Eric Garner is. I mean, in your book, I mean, I think I read a review that compared it to The Wire, and I thought that was actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was pretty. I thought that was a good comparison to make because you're really looking at a context, and Garner seems to be sort of in the middle of it. And so let's start with Tompkinsville.
Right.
Tell us about Tompkinsville.
Yeah. Eric Garner worked a pretty small little area. It's a triangular, trash-strewn little park on Staten Island. That's not that far from the ferry entrance, and he stood more or less in the same place every day. A long time ago, 10 years ago, this used to be like a straight-up heroin shooting gallery. Over the years, the area has become more gentrified. The hardcore drug scene has more or less moved inside. And what Garner basically was doing was selling untaxed cigarettes to people who congregated in the park. And there were a lot of people there, sort of methadone addicts, a lot of drunks. But he was not like a hardcore criminal by any stretch of the imagination. He once was in his youth, but he was now an ex-con, older, had health problems, and had discovered this weird loophole in the law that allowed him to make a pretty good living, basically with this sub-misdemeanor form of commerce.
And so basically, I mean, he was playing off of the delta between the taxes in New York City on cigarettes and what he could get them for in Virginia, and then would just come up and sell them.
Yeah, exactly. The extremely high consumption taxes in New York City. The genesis of this was basically Michael Bloomberg needed a way to pay for the cleanup of Manhattan after 9/11, and the solution of just raising taxes on people who could afford it was untenable. So what they did is they created, the highest consumption taxes in the country. And as people in the city know, you got to pay something along the lines of $13 or $14 a pack just to smoke in the city. So what Garner would do is he would send mules down to Virginia. Ultimately, they were buying truckloads of cigarettes for about $5 a pack, and then it's just a straight up arbitrage like you would find in the financial markets. They would come back up here and sell it for split the difference and sell them for $9 or $10 a pack, and that's how he made his money.
And so, I mean, tell people just a little bit about Staten Island too, because I think I'm not sure that listeners who are outside of New York, Staten Island's sort of a weird.
Weird place.
I mean, it's a weird place, and it's particularly weird in the context of where it is, because it's one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, but it is not. It's different from the rest of the boroughs. This is like the most different of all the boroughs, I guess. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it's different. It's so it's connected to the rest of the city by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, the world's largest suspension bridge. And when that bridge opened, there were more or less open appeals to people who lived in the city, the sort of middle-class whites who lived in places like Brooklyn and Queens in the early 60s. And they would see ads that said things like, come get away from city problems and move to Staten Island. And so what you had is a sort of mass exodus of middle and working class white New Yorkers who, decided to get away from the city, among other things because it was largely becoming a black city, and they moved to Staten Island. And Staten Island, for the longest time, was almost an entirely white borough. Only lately had it developed a a statistically significant black population, and it was extremely segregated. And it's so segregated, actually, that the highway that bisects the island is literally called the Mason-Dixon line by people who live there. So all the black people live in the north side, and all the white people live in the south side, and that's part of the dynamic that happened in this case.
And Tompkinsville is like, we're starting to see like creeping gentrification. I mean, right. I mean, that's basically what's going on there, and that was sort of the impetus to deal with Garner.
Yes. So if you're standing on in the Tompkinsville Park, which is like overlooks the bay, it's actually really kind of a beautiful scenery. What you're looking at is a row of these sort of luxury condominium complexes that are just suddenly being built. You've probably, if you've seen them in where I live in Jersey City and along the shoreline, or along the 40s and 50s on the west side of New York City, they decided to build something called the Staten Island Corridor, which is a $1 billion investment into condominium high-rises. And prior to the arrival of those condos, I had one drug dealer telling me, "Man, I used to go 6 months without seeing a cop in this place." But then as soon as they put those condos up, suddenly the place was crawling with police, and you'd have these transactions for like $2 or $3 that would be the subjects of arrests. Which was very, very strange to the people who live there.
That part of the story reminds me a little bit of Hayes's last book, Colony and a Nation, where you start to like sort of perceive the police as not there to protect the community, right? Because the community was there before the billions of dollars worth of investment in the buildings were there, but they're there to actually sort of like control and clean out that area in some way. And that's, and you're right about Eric Garner. I mean, tell us just a little bit more about him and why he was such a frequent target for the police. Because we're talking about selling, and I guess, look, if I could see maybe some, the guy who owns the tobacco store is like, hey, that's not fair. He's selling, tax-free cigarettes. But I should say that having, 20 years ago, been on the street on Ludlow Street back before it was anything but a residential area, and there was a dozen of us coming out of a comedy club. We got busted with a joint. 2 or 3 of us had to go down we got tickets. The cops were perfectly nice to us. They just gave us a ticket, went down to the city hall. Nothing happened. That was it.
Right.
That was
right.
Their way of basically saying, like, look, we know there's a lot of like young people coming down here to party. We just want you to take it easy, as
right.
opposed to like chokehold.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And this gets to the heart of the entire issue, because if you listen to conservative media about this, what they'll say is, well, why didn't the guy just comply when he was arrested? Why didn't he just go along with it? And a lot of it has to do with exactly this informal difference in the way that certain things are treated, right? Like, if Eric Garner is walking around and he's selling untaxed cigarettes, and he sells a 50-cent cigarette to somebody, and a police officer sees him, that's likely going to end up being a real summons or a real arrest. Whereas, you might get pulled over for actually having weed or real drugs, or somebody in a nightclub might be also buying loose cigarettes, and police will know about it and not do anything about it systematically. And that's the difference. The difference is, people feel like when we do it, there's a zero tolerance. That's when that expression comes into play. But when it happens in other neighborhoods, it's more of an informal social control.
Right. I mean, expand on that. I mean, because the idea is to harass. I mean, it's not to police. It's literally to harass in that instance. And I think you talk about Garner was also a target because of his size physically, and the fact that the guy was trying to make money for his family, and he just didn't dress very well.
Yeah, I mean, this is another factor. So the whole theory of broken windows policing, upon which a lot of these ideas are predicated, and which were, like almost all American law enforcement innovations, they started here in New York. Broken windows is this idea that you crack down on major crime by going after what they call the visible signs of disorder. So you're looking at people who are drinking out of an open container, or riding the wrong way down riding their bicycles the wrong way down a sidewalk, or urinating in an alley, or selling untaxed cigarettes. And the theory is that if you aggressively pursue those kinds of offenses, then people will be afraid to bring a gun outside, because they're going to be afraid to be picked up for something stupid and end up with a felony charge that sends them up the river for 5 years. And B, just it allows the police to gather intelligence, because you have basically probable cause to stop people, question people, pat them down, find out who their known associates are, because you're asking questions about who you're hanging out with. So it was this huge law enforcement tool, this new strategy, and it was based on the idea of going after the minor person. And Eric Garner he couldn't possibly have been more perfectly representative of what they were talking about, because he was a minor criminal who was easy to catch, who was in the same place every day, who was 350 pounds, couldn't run away, and helped them get their stats up.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos